interesting part of our ongoing class on David and his shepherd song. Today is really interesting, and it's one of my favorite parts of David's life. Not his most successful one, but my favorite because of the amazing challenges against him. And we were talking 2 Sundays ago how long it took, decades, between David being anointed as king and him actually being king over all of Israel. All kinds of interventions, all kinds of bizarre things. When Saul died, his son Ishbosheth was king, and all of this after David had been anointed. And this is probably one of the most difficult parts. Did you get a? Yeah. Difficult parts of David's life, and one that we can really, really look to. You know, I think each of us at one point or another in our lives have really, in our own introspection, have said, well, this is it. I've really hit rock bottom. It's sort of like, it can't get any worse. And I think we're going to see in David's example here that that's exactly where he was, and we get to see how he came out of that, and I really like it. So, okay, last week we talked about David and Goliath and a whole host of other things, and things went pretty well for David after his battle with Goliath and a number of other things. He got taken into Saul's house, etc., etc. Well, all I can say is when you in your life, whether it's your secular life or your spiritual life, everything seems to be going well, take a picture. So you can look back on it and realize, oh, that's what it looked like. So how quickly fortunes can change, how quickly in that scenario are we easily so abandoning what makes us successful servants of God. That's the take-home lesson today. You know, David was catapulted from the back 40 into stardom. And yet, I would say God is good to not show us tomorrow. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever said, I wish I'd seen that coming? No, I think God is really good to us not to show us tomorrow, because we might run and hide. That's not what he wants. So in chapter 18, which we're not going to cover today, God grants David significant success. Whatever he was told to do by Saul, he managed to do it. But his success, and that's so true so often, his success enrages Saul, literally insanely angry with David for him being successful at what Saul asked him to do. And so Saul goes from anger in the chapter 18, from anger to dread to deceit, and finally to fear of David. Those 4 things, all because God had favored David, obviously, over Saul. And so, have you ever worked hard in a secular job and been successful, and somehow the person that had asked you to do all those things gets a little jealous? It's sort of like, it's really obnoxious. It's just the most amazing thing you've ever seen. It's sort of like, well, you asked me to do that, and it turned out okay, right? That's exactly what happened to David. And in fact, uh, you know, David was stripped of all his security blankets. Here's this shepherd teenager who, like I said, catapulted into the main event. He had never led an army. When you think about it, David went out and the men followed him in these situations. David had never led an army. The best he had done was take ferocious apex predator animals out by himself and things like that. But when you think about it, David's success was with Goliath was remarkable, but not as remarkable as his success in leading armed men and eventually Saul's army. Think about that. Nothing in his life prepared him for that, and yet God favored him in a way that he was really successful. So, roll forward to now. David has now lost his position. He's running from Saul. He's lost his position, his integrity, his dignity, and the people who cared about him. But he reveals throughout this lesson eventually a sure source of hope and comfort. And like I said, God is often good to us by not showing us what is tomorrow. So his huge popularity backfired. Saul was insanely jealous. First, Saul set impossible tasks for David, hoping that in doing so, the Philistines, who he would go up against, would slaughter him and he'd be done with David. But in every case, that was not what happened, and David was successful. But because of that, Saul not only, was angry, dreaded David and deceived David and was absolutely fearful of him. He actually attempted to murder him. It's the most amazing thing I think you could ever imagine. So he lost after that, either temporarily or permanently, all of the people who were important to him. His wife, Michal, Saul's daughter, who, again, Saul had deceived him. He promised him his oldest daughter and didn't do it. And then he had Michal, and in the scriptures that in the 4 chapters we're covering today, Saul offered him because he said maybe she'll be a trap for him. Well, it turns out in David's life, she was a trap for him. And so that was grim. He is now with Samuel, trying to be with Samuel, his mentor, but Samuel is away from him now because David is on the run. He is literally running from one place to another, and we'll see that. Not only lost Samuel, his mentor, but also Jonathan, his best friend. He literally is running for his life. Those of you who have at times faced down some really scary threats in your life, do you first go to God and say, what do you think, God? Should I do this or that? Or do you run for it? David was literally running for his life. He wasn't taking the time to ask God about it because he was too busy dodging Saul's spear and other things. And humanly, I get this, but it turns out not the best strategy. So stripping away, one wonders, okay, you anointed David through Samuel, God. What's going on here? Why in the wide world of sports would all this be happening if you favor David? Does this look like favoring David? I mean, it's sort of like, no, it doesn't to me. So let's take a deeper look at that. The stripping away of security, in this case, became preparation for becoming a king, not just a popular military leader or a popular giant killer, a king, a real king, which Saul was not, by the way. Such a role requires one who has survived and grown and changed as the trials of their life forged them. How many of you believe you have been forged? Not copied illegally, but put through a foundry, a forged. Forged steel is the strongest steel made. And the reason is that it's not only heated, but shaped into a specific shape where the crystalline structure is actually supporting the shape. So if you look at an axe head or a real strong hammer, it says forged, not stamped, not machined, not ground up and cut. Nope, forged. And so David was being forged. It's the hammer, the file, and the anvil. And it is not pleasant to experience the hammer, the file, and the anvil. I think we can see that. So, what do you do when you are being forged? Nobody told him. Samuel didn't tell him that. Oh, after I anointed you, you're going to expect some trouble. This is for your own good. Just hang in there. This is going to be good for you. No, David was anointed. He was a hero, and suddenly he wasn't, and he was running for his life. Can you imagine that kind of whipsaw in your own life? And all the while, being God's anointed, it's not like, this isn't as good as I thought it would be. I can only imagine what David was going through. But the problem here is that David, and this is you'll see later, but caved in, that's a pun for some of the things that happened to him. But we see that several things he did were terrible, terrible decisions, really bad decisions. In fact, this part that we're about to cover in 1 Samuel, David is running amok. And I smile when I say that because that was one of my grandfather's favorite phrases for me. He said, "The boy's running amok." So I can kind of relate to David running amok. Part of it is he was so panicked by what was going on and literally running for his life that he didn't take time to consult God. And, later on we'll see examples of when he did and it worked out great. So the first bad decision he made was at Nob. That's where Ahimelech and a whole group of God's prophets were living. And David ran from Saul to Nob after he was with Samuel at Ramah. And, he lied to Ahimelech. David shows up unarmed by himself to Ahimelech. And Ahimelech says, "Well, David, you're God's anointed. Where's your army?" He says, "Oh, I'm on a specific mission for Saul." Well, that was a lie. And he says, "My men need food, and I need a weapon." And so Ahimelech, the head priest there, said, "Well, have your men abstained from sex with women? Because all I've got is holy bread," and that was one of the requirements. If you're going to eat holy bread, even though it's taken off the show table, that there are certain things you have to meet. And David says, oh, of course you have. Yeah, sure. So the Ahimelech gives him holy bread and further gives him Goliath's sword, which was now in Ahimelech's possession as one of the high priests. So David now has Goliath's sword, and he has been fed well. His men weren't, he had no men that were following him. He was by himself running from Saul. So he lied to Ahimelech. Well, there was a whole community of prophets and priests in Nob. Whole community, men, women, children, and animals. Doeg, an Edomite who was Saul's chief shepherd, witnessed this. And David saw Doeg, knew who he was, but he lied anyway. And so Doeg then goes and rats out not only David, but Ahimelech. And Saul's men come and they say, where's David? And they say, well, he's gone. And he said he was on a special mission for Saul. And, they cleared up that matter and they killed the entire community. Men, women, children, and their animals. Nothing was left. Who did that? Was it Saul's men? They all refused because these were prophets of God. Doeg did that himself, ingratiating himself to Saul. So by David lying and then running, left these innocent people to be slaughtered. And that's just a really bad decision. And if you want to try and understand what running amok looks like, this is a pretty good example, a really good example. And would you expect that from God's anointed? No, I wouldn't. But that's what David did. He failed to inquire of God what his will might be. He lied to priests in order to feed what men he may attract. He ran away and left innocent people to be wiped out. It says by Saul's men, but not really. It was Doeg, and I guess you could consider Doeg Saul's man because he was his chief shepherd. Okay, so he runs from Nob, having left a wake of destruction behind him. Now he runs to Gath. What do we know about Gath? That's where Goliath is from. He runs to the Philistines and decides to hide there. Achish, the king of Gath. So, David, what in the world are you thinking? Why in the world would you do that? Well, I'm thinking that he was thinking, well, nobody's going to look for me amongst the Philistines. But it's sort of like when the women were saying singing, Saul has killed the thousands and David has 10,000s. Those were Philistines. Those were the Philistines that were being slaughtered. And so David runs to Achish, and he's David, you're close to the heart of God. You're a majestic warrior. Can this be you? It just is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So finally, David realizes this wasn't my best decision. And so he thinks to himself, it's sort of like, well, if Achish knows that he has me, he may teach me a huge lesson. And so he decides to pretend that he's insane. And so he's at the gate, scratching at the ground like an animal, drooling down into his beard, and uttering all kinds of silly phrases over and over again. He pretended to be insane. And you know what Achish said to the people who brought David sort of to him? He says, is it that Gath doesn't have enough insane idiots? Are we looking to have more? He says, get rid of him. Let him leave. Well, David's purposes here were served. Uh, thank goodness. But he ran now from Gath and the Philistines to something called the Cave of Adullam. Bad, bad place. Talking about jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. The Cave of Adullam was probably over, I forgot what it was, at least 160 acres of tunnels and interlocking caves and secret places, just an amazing rabbit warren. And it had attracted all of the people who were down on their luck, all of the people who owed great amounts of money. It was a cave of discontent. Angry people, they didn't like their lives, they didn't like what had happened to them, and they all had found their way to the Cave of Adullam because it was a good place to disappear, literally. There were plenty of smaller caves within it that are all interconnected. It was like an ant warren. David not only lost his dignity at Gath, he lost his integrity at Nob, he lost his dignity at Gath. David here was attempting to lose himself. I think he was at his wit's end. He runs there. The cave certainly provided a place to hide. They were a labyrinth in which David could, in fact, escape. This was about as low, I think, as David could have reached at that point. That series, integrity, dignity, just wants to lose himself. That's pretty tough. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation in your life where you felt that low, but that's where David was. So there are at least 400 people there already. Most of them were angry, bitter, most nearly all men. This is, if you were talking about a rabble, this would be them. And they were a law unto themselves, wouldn't be people that would make a good army, you would think, sort of like, yeah, not so. But, this was really important. This is probably the most important part of the forging of David, is that he finally consulted with God. He cried for help. Darren, can you read Psalm 142, 4 through 7? This is a psalm that supposedly David wrote while he was in the cave of Adullam.
Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me favorably. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. I cried out to you, Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give your attention to my cry, for I have been brought very low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will look after me.
So it was sort of a prison, but it also was part of the forge. So again, David's never led a real army. He's never built a real army. He has been asked to lead Saul's army, and he was really surprisingly successful. But all that's been stripped away, and David remains God's anointed. And so what happens here is nothing short of amazing. So 400 malcontents and a literal rabbit warren of caves and tunnels. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, well, first 400 turned into 600 because people heard that David was there. Oh, but it gets worse, and you'll probably smile about this. David's relatives, including his parents, decide to come there to be with him. And David's going, the last place he would trust his parents or his relatives was in this place. And he's just going, well, he had a thought, and he actually sent his parents under the protection of another local and trusted king in that area, and sent him just stay with this guy. He's going to look after you. And so David begins to look about it. One of the interesting factoids about the Cave of Adullam and why it's probably more famous than you might realize was that during the Christian persecution that was coming literally centuries later, Christians hid out there in the Cave of Adullam to avoid being literally run through with the sword. So it's an interesting place historically. David had a little bit of a transformation. Truly, the cave itself was a true crucible. David stepped up. He renewed. You see that in Psalms 142. He looked up instead of horizontally. When David went through these incredible trials, he was looking horizontally. It's sort of like it's him against the world. What am I going to do? Oh my goodness. When David finally went vertical and said, God, I really need some help here, David's decision suddenly changed. And the outcomes of David's decisions really changed. So looking up was really important. He renewed his dialogue with God that he had been carrying on before in Psalms, right? Wrote many songs. He came clean. One of the things you'll see in this 4-chapter section that we're covering today, David confessed and repented of his responsibility for the massacre at Nob. Oh, so important. So important. He finally dawned on him, really, really messed up. And it caused anguish to an entire community. They were destroyed. I did that, and I repent of that. So he came clean. And then David stood tall. He resumed his God-given leadership, and he began acting like not a leader of an army. He began acting like a king. And in large part, that was because of his time in the Cave of Adullam. If there were anything that could cause you to change, spending 40 or 50 days in the Cave of Adullam, where it was you against another 400 men, it's sort of like, wow, this is not good at all. But David made the right moves at this point, under pressure, but still the right moves. As a result, the 600 men that came out of that with him became, 400 of them became David's mighty men. These are the men that would not leave David's side. Truly, truly amazing. You've got 400, the most disgusting malcontents in the world, and with David's leadership, they all left. They eventually moved to the stronghold of En-Gedi in the desert. But these men became the men that protected David, and eventually they were David's mighty men who, when David grew so old that he actually was a danger not only to himself, but to those around him, and he nearly got killed in battle. And several of these mighty men surrounded him, fought off probably the Philistines, and said, "Look, you're too valuable to us to see you slaughtered on the field of battle. Look, you got to stop this. You can't be with us anymore on the field of battle." That was those same guys. Those same guys. Just amazing when you think about it. So, uh, so they're now at the stronghold in Engedi. They've avoided Saul for the time being, but David stood tall. He resumed his God-given leadership, and his identity was restored. Okay, let's look at that real carefully. Was David's circumstances changed? No, but his identity was restored. Wow, that's really good. The fact that he now is going vertical means that he can likely lead those 400 to 600 men effectively, and that God will guide him to do the things that God's will tells him to. I think that's really important. You can have your identity restored, but your circumstances aren't going to necessarily change. Not at all. And so sometimes we're looking for relief. And in fact, what you should be looking for is an absolute understanding uh, that God is in control and you're seeking after His counsel, His guidance, those type of things. I can understand how David went through this period of time. I really can, especially when you move from the thing where you're sort of God's anointed, you just killed, and then you kill Goliath, and things are going well, and suddenly you literally are running for your life. Saul, on 3 different occasions, tried to pin David to the wall with a spear 3 different times. It's sort of like, so he's running, and each time he runs, it gets worse. He goes to Nob, creates a disaster there. He then goes to Achish and barely escapes with his life, acting a fool. And then he goes to the cave of Adullam, where every moment his life was sort of threatened. There were 400 guys there when he first got there. Don't you think they had a pecking order? And don't you think that David probably was low man on the totem pole? Yeah, wow. So that's quite a story of being forged to do what God had wanted. I truly believe that God did David a big favor by not telling him what tomorrow looks like. If David could have seen all of this, I think he would have said, "No, sir, you got the wrong guy here. You need to pick some other body." I think that's where most of us would have been. So his identity restored, but his actual circumstances not so much. We'll see later that Saul continues to pursue David repeatedly. Tries to trap him. David, each time, though, consults with God. It's sort of like, well, I'm going to go into this king's area. We'll see that coming up next week. And I really want to know, will this guy give me to Saul? And he consulted a prophet. The prophet said, yes, he will. And so David immediately leaves and goes somewhere else. So it's one of those things that now David and God are at least on speaking terms. And that's a good thing. I hope that we all can remain on speaking terms with God. But David has reestablished that. And for the most part is back on track. But what a track record this was. I mean, if there ever were a case of carefully considering your situation before doing anything, and that would include going to God, There's no situation you can't make worse. David did that at least 3 times. So, okay, he got himself out of this. Well, what about that? Let's think about that. How does all this apply to our lives? I've got a couple of questions here. What are some of the caves you have attempted to lose yourself in when you have trouble facing up to your responsibilities or when you are actually injured? Now, I think there are times where each of us has been not necessarily physically injured, but emotionally injured. What do you do? Do you retreat to those caves? Uh, do you begin thinking, what can I do? What can I do? Instead of, God, what should I do? What should I do? Uh, these are really good lessons. I think if any of us were ever literally running for our lives, we would be making decisions for ourselves for a while. I'm not sure we would immediately turn to God, but things got better for David when he did. That's pretty. Any comments on that? Yes.
For me, when I need that escape, quote unquote escape, music is that cave that I hide myself in. I find a certain song or a certain set of songs, and I just lose myself in them. And all of what's going on up here just goes away.
Isn't it amazing that music has and can have a soothing effect on us? Even in David's life, him playing the harp for Saul, the Bible calls it when he was afflicted by an evil spirit. Uh, David's psalms and his harp playing seems to, at that point in time, soothe Saul. There was a time to come where David and Saul were forever separated. Now, there's just no way that they could be together because Saul had made the decision to kill him, and he was going to use any person or situation to be able to trap David and kill him. He literally feared David, and that was one of the scriptures that were in that 4 chapter reading is that Saul feared David. And he feared that David would, in fact, absolutely drive him out of his kingship. He didn't. In fact, his son, Ishbosheth, was king after Saul died. He and Jonathan died in battle, if you'll remember. Anybody else? Where have you escaped? Where do you go to sort of gather your wits? That's kind of what David did in the cave of Adullam, is gathered his wits. As painful as that must have been in that context, that's what he did. Have you found yourself literally when you looked around yourself after whatever the threat or real challenging situation, if you looked around and said, wow, I need to start making a better set of decisions here. What in the world? What was I thinking? Anybody find themselves in that? I think I've found myself a couple of times there.
I've been there, but nowhere to hide.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I have too. There is nowhere to hide. And I think where salvation comes or rescue comes is when you stop doing this, what's my next move here, and start that vertical and asking God what He thinks. And maybe you could not be subtle. My prayer usually is, God, don't be subtle with me. Please don't be subtle with me. Subtlety is wasted on me. Please make it like a door slamming in my face or something. Please help me. So I think part of that is that whatever you choose is that refuge. In that choice needs to be a vertical relationship with God, and maybe quit depending on yourself to make emergency decisions. I don't know how many times people have been distracted in such a way that they were having to make all their decisions on their own because they didn't have time to consult God. So that vertical establishment, I think, is the way out. Uh, Anybody else on that? Yes.
We might not be on that, but what I find amazing is when you read the Psalms, David goes to God with the troubles of armies after him and the troubles of spirits after him
Yeah.
repeatedly. But one of the evil factors was Saul, and he never mentioned Saul because I believe that he knew that was God's anointed, and he took it to the end where he wouldn't even talk bad about Saul.
Well, and it's funny that you'd say it that way, but at Nob, even Saul's men, his army and commanders, uh, absolutely didn't have the boldness to kill God's prophets and priests, and so they backed away. And it was Doeg the Edomite that decided to do it on his own to ingratiate himself to Saul. So
One of my favorites I go to as far as David and his enemies is Psalms 25. And you, Lord, my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over
over me, yeah, it's part of a song we sing. Yeah, I love it, absolutely. Yeah, well, you can see through the haze here in this story, you can see why God was a man after David's own heart. I mean, David was a man after God's own heart. You can see that. You can see how that could be. But you can also see how easily distracted you can become when every breath you take could be your last. Uh, pretty scary stuff. And truly a forge for David. I really like that. So, second question here. What are some of the security blankets that you have been stripped of? Yes.
I'm not sure if you can consider it a security blanket, but my mom.
Yeah.
That one
I'd say
person,
that's a real security blanket.
that one person I knew I could turn to.
Yep. Absolutely.
Whether it was to vent or to ask a question that I know no one else would have the answer to.
Right.
Just that one person I could turn to.
Yep. I get it. I truly get it. Anybody else?
Well, I think we all can go through you get security, I got some money in the bank and I can't use that.
Yeah. I guess I would look at that as earning power. Stripped of that, that's not good. It's definitely makes you vulnerable, and in a way that you recognize immediately. I get that as well as anyone. What else? What are some of the other things?
Your home, your family, all of those that in this world, we rely on as, well, that's a definite, I have to have that, and that's what you rely on because it's what's normally accepted
Yes.
in our world today. And it might always be something different that the Lord has in store for us. He hasn't shown us what's going to happen tomorrow,
Yeah.
and we lose those things.
I hope he continues to withhold tomorrow from
Yes.
us. I'm not sure I could take it. Really not at all. That's a really good one.
Yeah,
I have one that is going to surprise you. Anonymity. Being stripped of anonymity was extraordinarily painful to me. When I first started in my job, there would be meetings where really multi-million-dollar decisions were being made. And when the hard decision had to come up, everybody in the room turned to this guy. And it was sort of like, and I just looked down and said, boy, am I glad I'm not there. It's sort of like, poor guy. And usually the guy, it was usually several different people, but would come up. He wasn't afraid. He didn't panic. He just said, well, here's the three things we're going to need to do that will help us make the decision. And boom, 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 I'll see you in 3 days. And boom, got done. And so that anonymity of me being able to look down and say, well, what would I do, changed in my job. And there came a day when those hard decisions, everybody looked at me. And it was sort of like, oof. I didn't sign up for this. I signed up just to be a little beady-eyed scientist. You know, it was sort of like, nah, you got the wrong guy. This is absolute misidentification. But that lack of anonymity, uh, that was a security blanket that got stripped away from me. Sort of like, no, it's gone. So that's something that I can really relate to. I like I said, I just signed on to be a little beady-eyed scientist and do things in the lab and just enjoy. But it didn't turn out that way. So how about you? Anybody else? What's been stripped away that you're really you depended on as a security blanket? Yes.
Well, my career,
Yes.
because when I had to take insulin, I had no more CPLs. So then I had no job.
Yeah.
So then what do?
Yeah, it's really difficult, especially when two things were apparent from my conversations and getting to know you. One, you liked your job a lot. And secondly, you depended on that job. And because of no bad decision on your part, you suddenly had both of those things taken away from you. Yeah, that's difficult. Yeah, for sure. Part of my job was being able to put on hazmat gear. It's called DOF and Don. So part of that was taken away from me because of my asthma. I eventually could not certify uh, from a respiration standpoint to be able to use SCBA and things like that. And it was sort of like, well, it was kind of like David being removed from the battlefield. It's sort of like, well, you're going to have to just direct from the sidelines here and make sure that everybody that's going in is going to be safe and got the right gear. So, yeah, those kinds of things sometimes are taken away from you. But I think God may decide at certain times, it's sort of like, okay, yeah, you're not going to like this, but I really need you to do that. Who knows? He may have protected you and me by asking us to step aside.
I think sometimes he does that so we depend on him more.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt
Because
about it.
I was a closet oxygen user.
Yeah.
I would go to my car, get on the oxygen for a little bit, then
Right.
go back into work,
Right.
you know, until I had to be with it, you know, it took a long time to just say, okay.
Yeah, I think all of us have secret fears. And who knows which folks go where. But I think one thing we share in common is that we fear limitation, whether it's mental or physical, movement, freedom, all those things. You don't want to be limited. It's sort of like, no, I may look like I'm 90 years old, but I don't feel like inside I'm 90 years old. That type of thing. And so I think we all share that fears. No, I don't know.
Well, and it is, I'm glad Missy said that, because we all rely and trust in what we're comfortable with, what we feel secure in,
Yeah.
what we know, and God wants us to rely on nobody else and nothing else.
That's
except
exactly
Him.
right.
And it is so hard to let go.
Yeah.
And give it up.
Well, what's so cool though is if you think about this, depending on our wits, has probably gotten us to a relationship with God, brought us there. But it's not what's going to take us to heaven. At some point, we've got to use whatever skill set, whatever wits that we have to serve his kingdom. And so we're beating our swords into the plowshares to serve his kingdom. And so God has given us each of these things that we're talking about. Each of us have a different skill set. What is the transition he's asking for is great. Put that to use in my kingdom. And instead of just making decisions on your own, depend on me for your decisions, that type of thing. Does that make sense, guys? Has this caused you to look at 1 Samuel and those 4 chapters a little bit different than you would normally? Yeah.
I was gonna say too, when we want those people fighting for us that's been hiding in the caves, because those guys know what, they know what rough and tough is, and
Yeah.
that's who came and helped him, right? I mean,
That's right.
that's who I want.
I get it.
Good people, God knew where he was doing. He used wherever he went, he
Yes.
used
That's right.
those people.
And
Those,
Jesus went to the lowly.
Yeah. That's an excellent point.
yeah.
Okay, guys, we have a little time before worship here.